When you think about a gift, what kind is most significant for you? I'm glad you're here for this conversation today. Hi, I'm Rob, and it's great to be able to catch up with you for a few moments here today. I'm going to mention our interactive teaching videos that are available for kids and families, and you'll find our family posts on YouTube. A search for Kingston Standard Church Cabin Kids will take you right to our channel. There are also links and resources available through our Facebook page, and you can search for Cabin Kids on Facebook to discover more. Now, our focus here is directly related to the themes and scriptures of our family videos, and we are looking to better equip families for conversations in their homes about faith as we all follow Jesus together. I want to invite you to connect with us online or in person if you're here in the Kingston area. There's a link in the description box that'll connect you directly to our website. You could subscribe to our YouTube channel or like or follow us on Facebook. You'll also want to connect to our Cabin Kids YouTube channel as well as our Cabin Kids Facebook page. And if you'd like to connect with us online, let me encourage you to consider messaging us through Facebook Messenger, or you could use the email address that's on the screen below. And if you have any questions or comments or any way that we can pray for you, we'd love to hear from you and to be able to communicate with you in that way. Has there ever been a gift that you've waited for so long that you wondered if it was ever going to arrive? Now, in these weeks in December, we've been taking a look at some of the gifts that God gives us as a part of the big story of Jesus' arrival as a baby. And Jesus is the fulfillment of God's long-term strategic plan. Because of Jesus, it's now possible for us to have a connected relationship with God that will last forever. James, the brother of Jesus, wrote that every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so as we remember the Christmas story, we're taking time to celebrate the greatest gift that the world has ever known. So let's jump into what we can discover today. Take a moment and think about the best gifts and the worst gifts you've ever received. Usually we can all think of the story of that one gift that really missed the mark. When we got married, my wife said to me, "Let me assure you that any gift that plugs in will be in that category of missing the mark." Growing up, I do recall that there was this glass wind chime that I received when I was about 9 years old from a relative, and I'm not sure what happened there. I mean, I was opening it up and wondering as I'm pulling it out, like, what is this for? Now, on the other hand, I remember always looking for a significant gift that was a part of Christmas. The glass wind chime, that wasn't it. But when I really think about meaningful gifts, the ones that mean the most to me, they're usually invitations to spend time together. I recall when I was a teenager, we took a family trip to a youth convention, and it was very significant in my life. It was the convention where I listened for the first time and heard, in a way, God calling me to be a part of ministry in my life. There's also some of those special gifts that are surprises from time to time. Sometimes there's special birthdays that we experience, like those 0 birthdays. For whatever reason, when you're turning into a new decade, 30 or 40 or whatever, it seems like it's a special year. And on one of those special birthdays, our family totally surprised me with tickets to an NHL hockey game with my favorite team. And there was enough for all 6 of us to be able to go. So it included a trip for us to another city and an opportunity to spend some time overnight together and have some fun times in that city together. And even while we were at the game, there was this cool highlight reel moment that happened in the game where there was this major check into the boards, and the guys who hit into the boards totally broke the glass, and it was amazing. Now, I didn't see that gift coming at all. So what is the best kind of gift to connect with you? Now, we've been tracking here in the scripture in the long lead up to Jesus' arrival on earth throughout the scriptures. And so we've been following from the beginning, way back in August, through Abraham's family and how God continued to share about the promised Messiah. And you could understand by now, several thousand years later, that the people of Israel would be looking around and kind of wondering when things were going to happen. There'd been this long period of time in history where things had been really quiet. 400 years, as a matter of fact. You may be aware that when Malachi in the Old Testament ends until the New Testament begins and with the birth of Jesus, there's a little over 400 years in that period of time. It only takes us a page to turn in our Bible, but it was 400 silent years of waiting. And this is when Jesus shows up on the scene. Now, even though everyone in Israel had heard of the Messiah, they were expecting the Messiah, they knew it was going to be this massive turning point in history, it was still a surprise gift. And it really made no sense at all to them how it all went down. I mean, they were really looking for relief, some kind of rebuilding of the nation, so to speak. The leader they were looking for and expected, they thought he was going to show up and everything would be even better than it had been during their strongest geopolitical kingdom years as Israel underneath King David. They were searching for this significant moment, and while they're waiting for this big reveal, so to speak, Luke describes for us what happens. In Luke chapter 2, at that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that the census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their own ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled from the village of Nazareth in Galilee, and he took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. Now, everything had been pointing in this direction. Signs and hints and comments and things that maybe probably didn't make as much sense as they were looking forward because they hadn't experienced it yet. But in the surprise way in which Jesus showed up, so many people in the middle of it were just kind of going about their thing. They were looking maybe for a significant moment and they missed the simple one that was right in front of them. And when we look at it now, it makes total sense to us that Jesus would arrive when he did, how he did, with all of the different kinds of details. But in the moment, this just kind of went right past. It blew right past the people of Israel, who were all right there. What do you think they would have thought if they'd discovered, if they'd known? Could you imagine the horror of the person taking care of the inn that turned Mary and Joseph away? If he could look back and really thought about the way he treated the Messiah, do you think there might have been anybody who was staying at the inn that night that would have gladly given up their space if only they would have known? But you know, these people and so many more missed what was really meant to be an opportunity to make space for Jesus. My grandfather growing up was a man of habit. You could count on his habits. He was very reliable, so routine-oriented. He always had breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he had lunch at exactly 12 o'clock sharp, and he had his supper at 5 o'clock, and he had a snack at 9 p.m., and he was in bed at 10:30 at night. So you could look at your watch, and any particular day you could say, well, it's 9:30, Grandpa's going out to get the mail. Oh, he's probably finished reading the paper, it's about 10:30. Oh, I bet you he's watching his favorite TV show, it's around noon, and he's just finished his lunch. You never had to wonder what he was up to. Saturday night, 7 o'clock, he was watching the hockey game. Shortly thereafter, he'd be in bed. His pattern continued to help us to understand much more about him and what he was up to as we thought about his patterns and his ways. Now, is it possible that in Jesus' arrival, that maybe we're getting a hint of some of God's patterns in revealing himself? Because when we look at this after the fact, we can see a lot of very cool things in the larger picture because we're very familiar with the details of Jesus' birth. And most people in that day, they were just kind of occupied with all kinds of stuff in their lives. But we get to analyze and maybe sometimes criticize as we look back. And that's easy for us to do when we look back at history and kind of judge the way people did what they did. Because when it's all over, it's kind of like the Monday morning quarterback thing. Or as my grandmother used to say, hindsight is 20/20 vision. You can always see better when you're looking back. But looking back, we can see how Jesus' arrival gives us some hints of the patterns that he continues to operate in life and what we can count on him to do with us. It's interesting how his arrival came through unlikely circumstances. This was not the situation people were looking for at all, was it? The strange reality of this teenage mom and the scandalous backstory of a young couple and an unplanned pregnancy. It looked just like another baby in the mix. And with the infant mortality rate being what it was during that era, there might have just been some statements like, well, let's hope that baby survives. And the inn, it wasn't really the greatest circumstance to even have a birth, for that matter. The income, or the innkeeper's resources, they were just kind of taxed to the max at that point. And there really was not a good time or space to facilitate Jesus' birth at the inn. So he'd have to move people around. It wouldn't be easy. Maybe it's better if they just stay outside. Take care of that birth out there. Because if we deal with the baby in the stable, well, it won't be an inconvenience to the other customers. These were circumstances that weren't on people's radar at all to consider the birth of the Messiah. But Jesus' arrival also declared an unexpected time. This was not the timing people were looking for. There was a lot of things going on, and it was almost like they were looking for this significant moment to just pause all of life for Jesus to show up. But even though it wasn't the time that they were looking for, it was exactly the right time. So many things about the spread of the good news in the years following were revealing that this was a key moment in history. The Roman Empire had created a significant amount of time of relative peace. There was navigation that was open in the Mediterranean and in other bodies of water nearby. There was an elaborate system of roads throughout the Roman Empire that had been built by them, which all facilitated the spread of the news about Jesus, the truth about him later on. But people were just occupied with ordinary, everyday things. Their lives were busy, and because this didn't seem all that significant, well, they were looking around, and for them it was just a troubled time, right? The census was actually going to be a precursor to extra taxes the government had decided were necessary. And it was a frustrating time because people were having to travel and go to different places, dealing with the challenges of their personal economies being disturbed in ways that they couldn't control. It was a busy time because all of this mobility had created all kinds of extra activity, unwanted activity, maybe even in their lives. And they had so much to do. And as a result, the majority of people, maybe even some people who should have noticed what was going on, well, they didn't catch what was happening. They were paying attention to just so many other priorities. So in this unexpected time, where life was just marching on and continuing in full swing, this unexpected time was really right on time, but it seemed like people didn't have the time. And his birth also happened in such an unimaginable setting. I mean, the setup people were looking for was not typically a stable, which, in many ways we've made the stable kind of sentimental and almost idealized it in many ways. But in that part of the world, this was a cave where they took care of animals. Now, it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that Jesus entered the world through a cave the first time, too. But in our minds and in the recreations, we might clean the setting up a little bit, but in truth, this was the place where animals ate and slept and etc. They did their thing. Now, I'm not sure that all pregnancies are exactly the same, but I know in my wife's case that when she was expecting, smells seemed to be so much more pronounced. So I guess I'm just trying to imagine a lady who is expecting close to birth in a cave with all the smells and sounds and all of the creatures that are a part of a cave, even the creepy crawly ones that you would expect to see in a dank, dark cave. Now, while everyone was looking for the Messiah to make an entrance through a grand front door, Jesus snuck in through the back door. And I'd like to suggest that he's reminding us that we need to keep our eyes open to be able to see what he's up to. Because how often do we see God operate in this kind of a way, with an approach that's unlikely, or maybe even sometimes unimaginable? There have been times I know I've said, and maybe you have too, well, that's not really how I pictured that working out, but then God took care of it. Or it wasn't the setting that I pictured myself being in, but here I am. God took care of me. There's timings about this and in our lives that are unexpected. We see that. I wasn't expecting a resolution, but it just seemed to happen. Life was moving along, and then there was this miraculous moment right there on the edge of the explainable. It was not in the time that I expected, but it was right on time. And we know that Jesus is the best gift ever. And his arrival invites us to create space, to keep our eyes open, to catch what he's up to. And he shows up with a deliberate opportunity for us to be able to connect with him. So we see this pattern in his work where there's unlikely circumstances, there's unexpected times, there's unimaginable settings, and it reveals what we can expect from God in our lives and how we can watch for his activity in and around us, in the unlikely, in the unexpected, and in the unimaginable moments that he's unfolding his work. So this greatest gift, an invitation to connect with God, it still often shows up in the haste of life where God is stepping into our lives right through the mundane and revealing himself often in the simplicity of a moment. So will we miss seeing it in our search because we're looking for the significant? Or will we find ourselves making space for Jesus? Let me pray with us today. God, there are a lot of things that call to our lives, a lot of activities, a lot of distractions, a lot of things that kind of put us in a place where we find ourselves looking maybe for something significant while you're operating just in the simplicity of a moment. And so I pray that you would help us to be attentive to what you're doing so that we can see your activity in our lives and give you credit for it. Maybe even in a way like some of the shepherds did and some of the wise men did that others missed. Help us to be attentive to what you're doing around us. And so, God, today we thank you for the fact that you can be counted on. Your patterns are habitual, your patterns are consistent, that you will work in unlikely and unsuspecting ways so often in our lives that it will surprise us. And so, as you operate on the edge of the explainable, help us to pay attention so we can see you at work today. We're thankful for your greatest gift, the beautiful gift, the invitation to connect with you. We thank you and we praise you today for who you are. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, thanks again for taking a few moments to share this time together with us today. And again, I want to invite you to connect with us online or in person. If you're here in the Kingston area, there is a link, as I mentioned, that is available in the description box of this video that you can connect directly to our website. I'd invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel or like or follow us on Facebook. You'd probably enjoy doing the same as it relates to our Cabin Kids pages and channels in those settings as well. Let me also invite you to communicate with us if you'd like through Facebook Messenger or the email address that's on the screen. And before you go, if you don't mind taking just a minute to like, comment, or share this video, it's always an encouragement for us when you do. As always, we're praying for you. We trust you're praying for us too. We look forward to seeing you all again soon.